Hi, I'm Simon. Thanks for tuning into The Ordinary Filmmaker. If you're new to this channel, subscribe to get notification of new videos like this one so you don't miss any news, rumors, or tutorials. And by the way, I'm giving away a brand new Canon EOS R5 full-frame mirrorless camera to one lucky viewer. Details are in the description down below, or you can watch this video here. And I also recommend taking a look at the terms and conditions in the description of that video because there are some location and age restrictions. But before getting into this week's questions, I want to give a quick recap of the news. Back on Tuesday, Apple announced and then released on Thursday 3 new PCs with their in-house developed ARM-based M1 processor. The M1 combines 5 chips into one: the CPU, Thunderbolt controller, I/O controller, and this is interesting, the DRAM, all into a single chip. Now, I have been hard on Apple for soldering everything onto a single board, but I'm going to give them a little bit of a break here. The added performance and efficiency of combining RAM and other chips into a single chip provides significant performance gains and could shake things up if they are able to scale up the higher performance machines. Oh, and battery life? You're looking at close to 20 hours. Now, the memory is placed into a single pool. All technologies on the chip can access the same pool without having to make duplicates of the data. Apple calls this unified memory architecture. I published this review on the Ninja 5. The big surprise isn't how it eliminates record limits or mitigates overheating, but the huge amount of time it saves in post. If you're on the fence, consider getting the Ninja and give this video a watch. And lastly, Sony rumors leaked specs on the Sony a7 IV. Sony's very good at keeping secrets on pretty well anything they're working on, so anything leaked on the Sony a7 IV or any other camera should be taken with a grain of salt, as we saw with the a7S III. Now, it isn't a full set of specifications that have been leaked, but is it enough to get you interested? Well, that's it for the news. Now for your questions. Now, if you want your question answered by my weekly question and answer, drop a question in the comment section down below. Now, our first question is from Dwayne. Dwayne asks, regarding the LivePro L1 that you did a review on, do you need a capture card when using this piece of equipment? I'm using a laptop that doesn't have a video capture card. Well, Dwayne, this is actually the unit right here. The LivePro L1, it came with everything I needed. Now, the only thing I did have to buy, which I already had, so I didn't need to buy, but what you might need to buy is an HDMI cable from your camera to this device. Now, a lot of cameras do actually come with the HDMI cable, but me, despite spending about $6,000 on the R5 and its kit, it didn't come with an HDMI cable, so I did have to purchase that. But yeah, you're good to go with this here. All you need to get is your HDMI cable, and everything's good to go. Now, it does also provide a USB cable, so if your laptop doesn't have HDMI, you can use USB, but it's only 2 feet. So again, there's another cable you might have to purchase. But as far as a capture card go, no, you don't need one. Salmanoon asks, what's the cheapest camera for a webcam setup with a cam link or over USB with proprietary software? That sounds like a really simple question, but there's an awful lot to really go on there. First of all, the cheapest setup is probably using gear that you already have. Do you have a smartphone? Do you have a computer with a webcam? I mean, that really is the cheapest way to go. You've got everything you need. The only thing I would maybe top up from there is get yourself a gamer headset, and then your audio is going to be a little bit better, because the one thing people don't have patience for, they'll tolerate video that isn't the best, but poor audio, it's like fingers on a chalkboard. So you definitely want to have decent audio, but a headset isn't going to cost you a whole lot. So then the next step up from there, well, okay, so let's say you want to purchase a camera. Or actually, before purchasing a camera, do you have a DSLR or a mirrorless camera in your house that you don't really use much anymore? That would be my next recommendation. Then outside of that, if you want to purchase anything, you really don't have anything, well, take a look at this here. Now, this camera is only about $40. It's a knockoff. It's a DB Power EX7000. It's a 4K action camera, and it's basically a knockoff of a Live or a GoPro. But there's many other cameras that you can find online on Amazon that are a whole lot cheaper. They're under $100, and depending on what your budget is and what capabilities you're looking for, the sky's the limit. I used my Canon 70D for the longest time. It was 6 years old. And, thanks to the software that Canon has released, and I believe Panasonic, Fuji, and Sony have also released software that you can use your DSLR for live streaming. So if you've got an old DSLR, you can pick that up and use that as well. there are an awful lot of options here. Did you have a particular budget that you were looking at? Are there certain capabilities that really mattered to you more than anything else? Was audio very important? Do you need 4K or 1080? And a lot of people will have this argument of 4K versus 1080. And for me, the longest time I said, you know what, 1080 is more than fine, especially if you capture in 4K and downsample. That's for actual files, but for live streaming, I think 1080 is more than fine. But it really depends on not what I think is best, but what do you need for your live stream. So let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll try and help you find the best camera within your budget. F117WX asks, have you ever used Canon's EOS Webcam utility for Zoom or Teams? If so, do you have any advice on how to automatically keep my image in focus? I use both the EOS 80D and the R6, usually with the Tamron 10-24 APS-C lens. I always have to manually focus and then sit still. Yes, actually, today I downloaded the full version for the Mac. I have a Mac, so it functions a little different than on Windows. And I used it with Microsoft Teams. Now, unfortunately for the Mac, now let me sort of back up because not everyone's aware of this. So for the Mac, you actually get to run it on all these applications here. So you can see FaceTime, Cisco WebEx, Microsoft Teams, Messenger, Google Hangouts, YouTube Live, Zoom, Skype, Hangouts, and so on. Sounds pretty good, right? Well, not so much. I had problems, so I went to the support site, and right under this image, a few pages down, was this. Look at all those caveats. So I have Mac OS 1015 Catalina, so no, I can't use FaceTime. And Cisco WebEx, yeah, only with Chrome. And Microsoft Teams, yep, only with Chrome. And Skype, and only with Chrome. So there's a lot of caveats on the Mac side of things, and I tried it out. Using a knockoff battery that's 1.5 years old, almost 2 years old, I was able to get, I think our session was about an hour and 15 minutes, and I still had about 43% battery life left. So I had plenty of time left. I had no problems there. I was using a 50mm lens, and I set it on autofocus, and it kept me in focus the entire time, so I wasn't having any problems, but I was also using a Canon lens. I've had many people ask me, do you use Sigma or Tamron lenses? And I said, no, I always stick with OEM because I know I've got a single neck to choke and I don't have to worry about troubleshooting any issues. So I don't know if your issue's related to the differences between the different makes, but I'm not having any problems with autofocus. Now, the other thing you can do to mitigate that, or as a workaround, go ahead and set your f-stop to something like 3 and then focus manually. And so you can move around a little bit like this. And you're not going to find yourself going out of focus. That's the other thing you can do as well. But in terms of running it on the Mac, there are an awful lot of caveats, and the only way I was able to get it to work was using Chrome. And here's the problem with using Chrome. While I can see the person who's talking, and I can see myself down in the corner, and I can see the little images of everybody who's joined the conference, I can't get that Brady Bunch look where you can get to see everybody. When you're using the native Microsoft Teams application, you can see exactly everybody. Everybody has a square. They give you up to, I think, 9 or 10 squares, and then everybody else will get to go down below. And then if that person starts speaking, then they occupy one of the big squares. So the native app, I think, is certainly definitely better. What would I use? Well, I do a lot of conference calls. I'm working from home. And I think the Microsoft Teams version is so much better. Yes, I'm using the webcam of my laptop. Yes, it isn't the best. Yes, it's 720. But Teams gives you a lot of functions where you can block out the background and some other things that, you know, just gives me more functionality. I like being able to see everybody. Because if you say something and somebody kind of grimaces or smiles, or you get more feedback, you can read the room better. Whereas if you're just seeing one person through the Chrome app, I don't find it very useful. Jodoc asks, do you think the Canon M7 is coming, or was the M50 Mark II the last camera? Well, it really depends on which rumors you want to believe. There's a rumor that we're getting the M50 Mark II, and that was supposed to be coming out September, October of this year, but due to everything going on, that hasn't happened. Has it been pulled? I don't know. Rumors had indicated it's going to be coming out to the end of the year or into second quarter of next year. And of course, the M7. This is going to be like the flagship mirrorless APS-C camera with IBIS, 4K uncropped, and around $1,300. But again, hasn't been a lot about this. And these rumors haven't been CR2s or CR3s, they've been CR1s or CR0s, so I wouldn't put a lot of faith in these rumors. There's also a rumor that in the second half of 2021, we're going to be getting an APS-C RF camera, and that makes perfect sense. Why develop EF, EFS, EFM, and RF mounts? It's cost money, especially when you can take the EF and EF glass and mount it to the RF mount, and now you can just focus on making RF bodies and lenses. Canon's already said that they're done making lenses for the EF mount, but EFM, well, they don't have an awful lot out there, and there is some Tamron and Sigma. So if you do have those cameras, you can survive for quite a long time, but if they do come out with an APS-C RF body, I would say that the EFM mount probably is on its way out. I mean, why would you buy an APS-C mirrorless EFM that has limited lenses when you could buy an APS-C RF with the brand new lenses for the RF mount where the sky's the limit, or you can buy a lot of EF and EFS lenses. So at this point, I would, if I was a betting man, I would say that there's a greater chance that we'll see an APS-C RF camera coming out next year than either of these two cameras. Kurt316 asks, how do you see the future for Sony and Canon? I think it's very bright for both of those companies. Now, Canon is primarily an imaging company. They do cameras, they do stills hybrid cameras, video hybrid cameras, video cameras, camera cameras. They do industrial or cinema cameras, and they have an imaging department. So Canon is pretty much about imaging, and things have been looking pretty good for Canon. They have 45% market share. They're up 2.16 to 2.4% in 2019, and they have a ton of lenses, and that new RF mount is getting rave reviews. The R5 and the R6 are selling very well, and if you buy an RF camera, the great thing is you have access to a whole bunch of cheap lenses. You've got all the EF lenses, the EFS lenses, and of course the RF lenses. So you have a huge inventory, and don't think that adapting old EF and EFS lenses are going to be any worse. No, if anything, they're going to be better because you've got newer sensors and all that wonderful stuff. So I think Canon's pretty safe. They look like they're weathering the storm quite well. In the third quarter results, they upped their projection an additional 500,000 units. Now Sony, on the other hand, is second or third, depending on, well, they're pretty much tied for second with Nikon. And Sony's got a lot of excitement. People love their cameras like people love Canon cameras. They've got a good amount of lenses, and they're producing cameras that just deliver really good results and have good reviews. So I think Sony's looking pretty good in the camera division. But you have to remember that Sony is a consumer electronics company. They have many other different segments, so you can't really look to the future of Sony by just focusing on the camera division. You have to look at the conglomerate as a whole, and I think they're exposed a lot more to the market forces, and they might have a... but then again, you could say the argument for Canon is, well, Canon's just imaging, and what if imaging, the imaging market is going down? Well, it is in some areas, but not all. So, for example, the office area, imaging was doing quite well before this year. Now we have an awful lot of home offices, so they're selling not necessarily higher-end stuff, but more lower-end stuff to home offices. So I think, I don't know, long-term, like 10 years from now, I think both companies are going to be around. I think Pentax, Panasonic, and Olympus have many challenges to face, and I think that's where we see a greater chance of mergers and acquisitions. Another question from Joe Doc. For how many years would the R6 or A7S III continue to provide good enough 4K? This is my old Canon 70D. I bought this in 2013, so it's 7 years old at this point. And this thing just won't die. It's a terrific camera. It's built well. It's not weather sealed, but I took this to Niagara Falls on the Hornblower. You might be familiar with the term Maid of the Mist. That's the American side of the falls. On the Canadian side, it's called Hornblower. And this thing has performed really, really well. Once I got to year 6, I started using it every day for a YouTube channel. And I produced over 350 videos, and a good 300 of those have been on this guy here. And then earlier today, I started using it as a web conferencing camera, and it just keeps on going and going. And you're talking about video, so you don't have to worry about the wear on the shutter and all that. You basically press the shutter once when you start filming, it goes up and out of the way, and that's it. For photographers, it's different. If you produce, let's say, 200,000 shots, then you can start to come to the end of life of a camera like this. But for the video side of things, let me ask you this. Are you happy with the detail of either of those two cameras? Because that's really the main thing. In our homes, you're going to be hard-pressed to need anything bigger than 4K, and I'd still say that detailed 1080 in your home is almost imperceptible to 4K. 1080, really good detailed 4K, quality 4K productions look, or sorry, 1080p productions look really, really good. And if you do the same to 4K, really good 4K productions, I couldn't imagine you needing 8K and really being able to see the difference. So you can continue producing 5, 6, 7, even 10 years into the future. But there's certain things coming to the cameras that might have you go, yeah, while this is still capable of producing really good video, technologies like IBIS make a huge difference. Certain technologies like S-Log or C-Log might make a difference, dynamic range and stuff like that. But in terms of the detail, I can't really say. It's really, I need to understand your capabilities, Jodoc. So what kind of productions are you doing? Is this for clients? Is this wedding stuff? Is this for family type stuff? But I'm sort of spinning wheels because I don't know what you're really using it for, but I think the quality that it's providing today, it'll continue to provide that well into the future. And what I found out with technology like these cameras, the way they're built, you end up moving on long before they start failing. Paul Edwards asks, I was not clear on my question last week. I'm asking about the suitability of new UHS 3 cards. The new standard appears much faster. I was interested in a comparison to CF Express, heat speed, etc. I can't see when it'll be available and assume cameras today will only work with UHS 2 speeds. Well, that's a fair assumption to make, but I wouldn't even make that assumption. The cameras today were tested with UHS 2 cards, UHS 1 cards, and CF Express cards, or in the case of Sony, CF Express B cards. So we don't even know if they'll work or not. If they're going to use the same pin layout, well, they might be compatible, and that's a real possibility that the standard will make them compatible with UHS 2, you just won't get the speeds. Now, I looked at the standard earlier on in this year, and it looks pretty good. I mean, the UHS 3 cards look to be just as fast as the fastest CF Express cards, and they're smaller, and they probably have lower heat. But outside of that, it's pure speculation. I don't think we're going to see them in cameras for a good 3 years minimum because the standard has just come out. And if you have the R5, the R6, the Sony a7S III, well, you're probably going to have to wait for the R5 Mark II, R6 Mark II, or the a7S IV before you're going to be able to use the cards. But the good news is, if you got the a7S III, the Type B card is pretty fast. On the R5, well, the CF Express card is quite fast. But if you really want to speed up, your production, especially in post, go with something like a Ninja 5. I'm shooting with one now. Last week when I shot with a Ninja 5, I recorded about 90 minutes. I took it over to my computer. I actually copied the audio to the computer, but I left the video on the SSD. And it was super blindingly fast because I was recording in ProRes 422. There was no transfer speed. There was no sluggishness because I'm editing with ProRes right off the SSD, so there's no conversion times. So don't just think of the SD card or the CF Express card as a possible solution. Also consider the Ninja. Now I released this video here. Sorry, I seem to have hiccups. I'm trying to hold them back. But if you watch this video here, I did a review of the Ninja 5 just earlier this week, and I go into not a lot of detail, but I focus on some of the key points, and the real huge point with it is pure time savings in post. I was able to cut down last week's video from normally about 6 to 7 hours down to just over 3 hours. And that's a factor of 3 hours, or that's a savings of 3 hours, and that's significant. So UHS 3, it's a standard, that's true, but who knows when we're going to see it in cameras. But most likely it's going to be an upgrade some 3 to 5 years down the road. Biozonganti asks, why is the R5 price not dropping? That was definitely the plan. We were supposed to see a price cut in the third quarter, but I think just the overall fiscal performance of 2020 has them trying to hold on to as much money as they can. Now, I still think we'll see a price cut come Black Friday or even during the December rush, but I don't think we're going to see more than a $100 or $200 off. I think Canon's just trying to maximize the revenue that they can bring in, and why discount something if you don't have to? And I think based on some of the other cameras we've seen come out by Nikon and Sony, there's not a huge pressure to drop the price of it. Now, if Sony and Nikon had been a bit more competitive and lowered their price a bit more, then yes, I definitely think we would have seen the price cut. But I think 2020 is proving to be very challenging fiscally. I think they're trying to hold on to as much money as they can. DJL Hobbies asks, is 1080 better on the R5, R6, or 60 Mark II? Or is 1080p the same on any camera? Pretty much it's the same on any camera. Now the 60 Mark II was pretty soft, so you're going to get a better image out of the R5 and the R6. But honestly, if you want to get the best possible 1080, record everything in 4K and then downsample into post, and you're going to get much detailed 1080. Don't believe me? Well, take a look at the C100. That has a 4K sensor, but it only outputs in 1080. Inside the camera, it's downsampling that information into 1080, and that's why that camera produces a really detailed, or what some people might say is really sharp image. So shoot in 4K and downsample it into 1080. Yes, it's going to take you a little bit more processing time, but again, a Ninja can really help in that regard. But you're going to have much better detailed image. I did shoot with the R5. I had some videos that I published earlier this year, and it looked good, but not as great as 4K. And it really depends on your audience. If you're doing it for YouTube, you're not going to see a whole lot of difference. The Village Mayor was up here with me. We did a couple of reviews in the fall, and I showed him what the quality looked like on my computer before we uploaded to YouTube. And the difference is staggering. But if it's for corporate clients, if you're doing weddings, then yeah, I really recommend recording in 4K and then downsampling in post to 1080. And it's very simple. All you have to do in your video editing software or your NLE is just tell it your project is 1920 by 1080, set the frame rate to either 24, 25, or 30 frames per second, whatever the frame rate you shot in, and then just copy in that 4K image or 4K file, and what the software is going to do automatically, it'll downsample it. And it's just like blowing up a photo. If you enlarge a photo, it's not going to look as good. Well, the opposite is the case when you shrink it down. Gregg asks, for your Atomos Ninja 5 review, can you go over what options are available while recording? Also for the Ninja, can you apply a LUT while recording, or does it show you what it looks like after the LUT's been applied? Recording with the Ninja is very simple. So first of all, I made sure I had everything set up in the R5 first. So like I normally would do when I shoot. Yep, it's 4K. Yep, high Q is enabled. All right, C-Log is off, because in this setting here, I don't need C-Log. It's just silly. There's no reason to have C-Log. So I'm shooting in 8-bit. Color profile, I think, is neutral, something like that. So it's pretty much the same settings I would normally do. The one difference, though, is I go into the wrench menu, and I basically tell the R5 not to go to sleep. So I disable auto off, so it's on the whole time. Then in the Ninja, all I do is I say, well, you know what, and it's automatic. It'll just pull in and match the settings of what the R5 is giving it, up to 4K 60. So 4K 120 or 8K, it's not going to happen. But it'll give me up to 4K 60. And 4K HQ, don't worry about that, because all HQ means is the camera's taking the 8K and downsampling it into 4K. It's outputting a 4K file, so the Ninja takes that no problem whatsoever. The one thing I have to do with the R5 is I have to set on the input menu legalize to on. And this was through doing a few support calls with Atomos, and they said, yes, for the R5, you are going to want to put legalize to on. And if you watch the review video here, I'll go into details as to why that is the case. But that's it. That's all I do. I don't muddle with a whole bunch of other settings. Yes, I can change it to AVID codecs, or I could change it to ProRes RAW and a whole bunch of other different things, but I don't. I just keep it simple. I don't want to add a lot of complexity. I don't want to go crazy. And the quality is definitely not worse. And if you were to pixel peep, you'd definitely see that the quality is better. Unstatic asks, with global shutters apparently coming out next year, do you think it's a good reason for someone to skip the current lineup? Would it be worth the wait, or just a small inconvenience upgrade? No, I wouldn't wait for a global shutter. Now, it does depend on what camera you're getting. The EOS R and RP, for example, their global shutter's pretty bad, but if you look at the R5 and the R6 with the Digic X processor or the Digic 10 processor, it's very fast and the global shutter's noticeable, but not enough to have you, pulling your hair out. When I watch TVs and movies now, I'm quite often looking at the lighting, how they set the lighting up, how the room's set up. I pay attention to how they pan. And you know what? I've been noticing that a lot of Netflix and motion picture movies, they have rolling shutter in them. And it's not that bad, but I definitely do notice it. And here's the thing, unless your rolling shutter's really bad, unless it's getting in the way of telling the story, the level of rolling shutter that you have with most of today's modern cameras isn't going to be an issue. Don't worry about it. There's a lot of great cameras out there. If you buy Sony glass, get the A7S III. If you're buying Canon, the R5 or the Canon 90D. Sony, you've also got the A6100. You've got the Panasonic S1H, which is the big daddy of them all. You've got the S1. And I can go on. So yeah, global shutter is great, but it's nothing worth waiting for. I certainly didn't wait. And I would say that technology such as IBIS is far more important than having a global shutter. Rocky asks, have you thought of just recording in the picture profiles in 8-bit? I doubt anyone would notice any difference in the final output, and the editing would be like butter for you. I noticed that unless I will need to seriously push dynamic range or colors, I just shoot in a slightly adjusted setting of neutral or standard for most content. Believe it or not, all these videos that I shoot downstairs in my studio, they're all shot in 8-bit. The only time I shoot in 10-bit is if I'm outside. So when I was doing my videos earlier, yes, I shot those in 10-bit. But here's a simple rule of thumb. And I like what you're saying, Rocky. You shouldn't always be shooting in 10-bit. It requires extra work. And with the Ninja, I don't really have to worry about that. But if you're shooting a scene that has a lot of contrast between lights and darks, use a log profile. But if it doesn't, don't. I think this was, it was October. It was Thanksgiving, probably a couple of weeks ago. And I was shooting my son. He was raking leaves. It's the first time he's actually been able to pick up a rake and be able to rake. And I knew I needed C-log here because I had the darks of the shadows from the tree and I had bright lights coming through. And I just knew that, and here's the thing, when you see those shadows with your eyes, they don't look too bad. But in the camera, those mild shadows become very dark. And in post, C-log saved the day. So yes, use C-log, V-log, S-log, whatever log profile your camera has, only if the setting requires it. Because why give yourself more work, or why give your camera more work, or give your NLE more work, which costs you time? So very good point. Jeremiah asks, when recording on the Atomos Ninja 5 with the Canon R5 or R6, does it disable the touchscreen on the camera and you lose all touch features for adjusting settings when the external display is plugged in? If so, can you adjust the settings on the Atomos? Is it a touch display? So the Ninja 5 isn't a parasite. It doesn't take over the R5. It's not like the board collective and it just puts its tentacles into it. All the R5 is doing is sending a signal out to the Ninja, and it's recording that. So the R5 touchscreen still functions. You still set the focus to it. And as such, since it's an output stream, you can't use the touchscreen on the Ninja to control the focus. And, I did it a couple of times because you're used to touching the screen. You think, oh, this is now my camera screen, and it's not. So yes, the touchscreen works for both, and you can have both on at the same time. But the touchscreen on the Ninja controls the Ninja settings, whereas the touchscreen on the R5 controls the R5 settings. So if you want to pull focus, the R5. If you want to adjust settings on the Ninja, you touch the Ninja screen. So now basically, because of most of the times I'm in front of the camera like this, I just tell the R5 to put the view to sleep when it's shooting. And the result is I get almost 3 hours of record time on a single charged battery, which is terrific. I can just relax. I'm not checking the record time anymore. I'm not having to start and stop. I don't have to worry about overheating. And I can edit right off the SSD. External recorders like the Ninja 5 is truly amazing. And by the way, guys, I don't get to keep that. Despite my glowing review, That was all on me. That was me believing that. They didn't tell me what to say in any way whatsoever. But it's a truly amazing device. Just amazed at how much time it saves. And that's why I called it, I think I said time savings or something on the front, because the Ninja is all about the time that you save with it. Just truly remarkable camera, or not camera, accessory to the camera. If you have a business and this is your livelihood, get the Ninja 5. Stop the FOMO asks, when recording and editing 4K 120, which format and settings should I use to improve workflow speeds? And actually, before I answer your question, FOMO, I was just watching one of your videos the other day. I love your setup. I love the way you take people through things. I think you produce some of the best videos out there. And guys, if you're not subscribed to FOMO, go check him out and subscribe. He produces a lot of really good reviews. He was talking about TVs. And I forgot what certain settings, like 4K 120, he was talking about how these TVs claim certain settings, but then when you actually try them out, it's not the case. You find out, well, yes, you call them for support and find out, well, yes, it does 4K, but only with the PS5. Oh, all right. So, yeah, take a look at his stuff. So, again, what was your question? So, when shooting and editing 4K 120, so when shooting in try that again. When shooting and editing 4K, all I pretty well do is set it to all eye. I don't fiddle around with anything else. It's no different than shooting in regular 4K. But when I get into post, I do convert it to Apple ProRes. Now with the Ninja, I don't have to do that. But you know, trying to edit anything like that, if it's a long project, I definitely convert to Apple ProRes. I do these personal projects that can be about 90 minutes long, and everything works fine if I don't convert to ProRes up until about it gets to 20 or 30 minutes. And then by the time I get to 60 minutes, if I haven't converted to ProRes, you know, when I start up Final Cut, it can sit and spin for about 5 or 10 minutes before I can start making changes, which is just horrendous. And what I've learned to do is by converting everything to ProRes, things are just so much buttery smooth, so much simpler. So yeah, all I do is convert it to, I record in all eye, and I convert it to Apple ProRes. That's really it. Standard profiles, you know, do what you would normally do. If you shoot in standard or neutral, shoot in standard or neutral. There's no real rocket surgery to it. Prince asks, what do you think about drones and their future? Also about Sony AirPeak. I love them. I actually own one. I own the DJI Mavic Air, and I think it's an incredible drone. The 4K footage it gives is pretty good. I don't use them a lot, but there are times when you want that top-down shot, and it gives it to you, and you know, it's a whole lot cheaper than renting a helicopter for the day. But since I bought it, laws have changed. Canada, the United States, and Europe. I am licensed to fly in Canada under Transport Canada, and I'm licensed to fly in the US under, what is it called, the FAA. And you do have to be careful. That's the main thing you really, if you're looking at getting one of these, you know, check the legislation. And right now, I think there's laws that if it's under 250 grams, you don't need a license. But that doesn't mean they won't change that, right? Laws can change. So there is some training involved. In Canada, it's not very expensive to get a license. In the FAA, it wasn't very expensive either. But you do have to be careful. The last thing you want to do is get fined, because either of these two countries, they get pretty serious when it comes to airspace. Nobody, including yourself, wants to be responsible for downing any sort of aircraft. And yes, there have been some close calls. Now, as far as the Sony, I honestly haven't looked into it, so I can't answer that question, and I do apologize. I usually screen these questions ahead of time, and that's one thing I forgot to look up. Another drone question from the Village Mayor. If drones are used for domestic purposes, such as playing around in the backyard, film quick B-roll, or as mundane as checking the roof condition for a home, do you need a license? If so, then why is it so easy to buy a drone? Shouldn't store staff ensure that the customer has a license or intends to get one? Well, Village Mayor, I know you're from Canada, so I'm going to quote you based on Transport Canada, although the laws of the land in Europe and US are pretty much the same, because airspace around the world is, well, if you get a license, there isn't much that changed from one country to another because you're flying internationally, and the rules have to be pretty much the same. It doesn't matter whether you're just a few feet off the ground, or you're just inspecting your roof, or you're 400 feet up. You have to have a license if the aerial craft is 250 grams or more. And you don't want to take a chance, because the fines are pretty stiff. So if I'm inspecting my roof, normally what I do is I'll check with my neighbor to the left and to the right, and I'll fly up from the driveway so I don't have to have permission from people on the other side, because you can't have people within, based on the license I have, within 100 feet of where the aircraft is, right? So if somebody calls and police come over, or somebody from Transport Canada comes over and asks if I was flying a drone, I can say, yes, I was. This was my flight plan. This was, I got permission from neighbor on this side, I got permission on this side, and you can show them because it'll tell you where you were. And I didn't ask these people because, as you can see, I'm not within the required distance. But now, if you're flying higher, then you want to be cognizant of airports that are around you. You'd be surprised in the York Region area, Durham area, the Greater Toronto area, how many tiny airports there are. And the most dangerous part of flying is takeoff and landing. So part of the license will say is you need to be monitoring airwaves. You need to be monitoring if people are landing. So for example, on Lake Simcoe or Lake Ontario, you might think, under 400 feet I'm fine. Well, no, because planes will land on water. It happens in Canada all the time. And the last thing you want to do is be responsible for bringing down one of these small planes. So you do have to pay attention there too, because even though you're licensed and you're in an area where you can fly, you can still get in trouble because you weren't monitoring signals. And that's where it gets a little bit more tougher. But most of the times, like you say, I'm filming it in my backyard, or I'll go to where we were filming. And you saw, I had the drone when we were filming the Pear Gear. But I was monitoring everything. I wasn't going too high up in the air, and there were no airports in the immediate vicinity. But there are apps you can download, and it'll show you in Canada, the United States, where you can and can't fly your drone. And why don't stores ask for your license or require one? Well, they're not required to, so that's why. So, yeah. It's kind of like driving a car. There's a lot of laws you have to follow, and same with drones now. All because of a few idiots that thought it'd be really cool to buzz airplanes in major international airports. Our last question is from Rocky Cola. Why are all YouTube channels dedicated to video from Canadian filmmakers? Is it something in the fresh Canadian air? You know, when I first started looking at YouTube, and I'd used YouTube on and off for 10 years, but I really didn't start using it as a replacement to television until about probably the summer of last year. And I found a lot of stuff on cameras, and a lot of them were from Canada. And the reason I thought I was seeing so many is, well, it's a modern age. YouTube, like any other service, sees, oh, he's from Canada, let's give him people from Canada, right? Give people what they want to see. That's what I figured was going on. It was some sort of algorithm. But it wasn't until I actually started doing my channel and got into it more, I found out there was an awful lot of people, forget Canada, in my own area. So just within 10-15 minutes from me, there's Peter McKinnon. You're probably familiar with him. He's Canon's ambassador right now. There's Mari Hapuja. There's Camera Conspiracies. He's a little further away. He's actually in the Toronto area. Who else? Dustin Abbott, DP Review, Irene Ruddock, and of course me. And you might be surprised that Jared Poland is Canadian too. No, I'm just messing with you. No, Jared is very much a New Yorker. That's a pretty bad New York accent. That's really embarrassing. No, Jared is not Canadian at all. But yeah, I don't know why. Something in the air. I really have no idea. But there are quite a few of us, and it's odd because every now and then I'll be doing something and somebody else will say, "Oh yeah, did you know so and so is from Canada as well?" And no, I'm surprised. And it's all the more surprising when you realize, well, our country's a little bit bigger than the United States. We have about 1/10 of the population, so I have no idea why. Yeah, it's kind of strange. But that's a great lightweight question for the end of this session. One thing I just want to kind of bring up again that I talked about at the beginning is the webcam software that Canon has come out with, the actual full production. You'll notice it supports a lot more cameras like the Canon 70D now. So I did initially have problems setting it up because, foolish me, I thought I could just use it with Teams, FaceTime, Google Hangouts, and it would work perfectly fine. You have to be in Chrome for it to work. It does work very, very well. The quality of the video. This was just 1080p, but the quality was very, very good. But if you have a decent camera as part of your laptop, I think the software is far more capable if you don't use the Canon supplied software. Because like I said, in Teams, I have a lot of meetings where I have 12 or more people, and I like to see the entire room. I like to see how people react to certain comments. And with a Chrome version, I can only see one person who's speaking at a time. So it's not a knock on Canon. It's just a knock. It's just that it doesn't give you the same capabilities that you can when you're working directly with the app. And I really wish the Canon software on the Mac would work directly with the software, because Teams, it gives you the option to choose camera. And if it would allow me to do that, I'd use it every day, but I don't think I'm going to plan on using it much more. Everybody else is in the same boat. I don't have the worst the camera of my colleagues, so I'm okay. And then another nice thing about Teams too is it kind of blurs out the background and does a pretty good job. Well, there goes another week. I can't believe it. This week seemed to go by pretty quickly. Just a couple of things I want to talk to you about. You notice how I'm fiddling around with the set. In yesterday's video, you'll notice I added that bookcase right behind me, and it was centered, and I got some comments, Simon, you can't have it centered. Oh my God, he's got it centered. No! Unsubscribed. No, it wasn't that bad, but there was a lot of comments saying, Simon, move it to the left, move it to the right, shimmy, jig it about, you know, anything, but don't do that. Well, believe it or not, I had just gotten the package, just set it up when I saw the news, and so I didn't really have time to play around with it. I tried to make it sure that it was not looking awkward or anything. And you'll notice on this side, I've got a plant, and it's green, a lovely green plant. I love green plants. It's giving me fresh oxygen. It's beautiful. But a lot of you also said, oh God, I can't watch this channel. It's got poor lighting. You need some lighting. Give it some lighting. Give it some colors in the back. Give it some, make it look good. Please, Simon. Please, or I'll unsubscribe. No, it wasn't quite like that, but I had some comments, and Daniel was a little tough on me. He said, Simon, yeah, I'm not so sure I'm really a big fan of that. Rest assured, I am getting some lighting now. Part of the reviews I'm doing, I get gear every week, and I do know I'm getting 4 lights. These are LED lights where they change colors. So I'm going to fiddle around with different colors, light things up a little bit better. Now, right behind me, you can see, and that's always been there, there's a light right behind me. And that gives the background a bit of light, but I know it's not enough. So when those 4 LED lights come, we'll see how well they do. They're $19 US or $20 US a piece, which is pretty cheap. Now they don't, here's my cell phone here. Unfortunately, they don't have an app where you can control them all 4 at once. So that's, you know, I'm not, but $20. Some of the ones that allow you to control them with an app are $80 a piece or more. So $20, yeah, maybe, right? So we'll see how that goes. So again, I'm fiddling around the set. I'm trying to provide a bit more depth, and it should look better over the coming weeks, but you know, that's it for that. And one other crazy thing that happened this morning, I were just getting ready, and all of a sudden we heard this incredible loud smash and then screaming. I really hate it when people do DIY improvements and they don't do things properly. So in our spare bed, or not spare bathroom, it's a bathroom. And this is the one we use most of the time. It's not part of the master bathroom. This is where my son uses it, my wife uses it, I use it. We have a vanity light, and it's got a metal backing, goes about this big here with 4 lights on it, and they have some sort of glass thing to make it look pretty. It came crashing down and glass shattered everywhere. Thankfully, nobody was right there when it happened, but it scared the living daylights out of my son. The people who had put it up, they didn't bother to anchor it properly, and they only anchored it on the center instead of anchoring it on both ends, and oh, frustrating. It's just like, come on, it would have taken, what, another 10 minutes to properly anchor it? And when I bought this house, there's one room, the master bathroom, where you've got to see this mirror to believe it. It's about 12 feet, and maybe I'm exaggerating, maybe it's 10 feet, but there's 2 sinks, so it goes to the end of both, and it's probably about 3.5 feet up, and you can imagine how much that weighs, and I was really concerned about that. So when I bought the place, I brought in a friend of mine who's a general contractor, understands this stuff, and I had him check it. just to make sure it was anchored properly. But if you've just recently bought a home or bought a home in the last couple of years and you've got some of these wonderful things hanging from your walls, especially in bathrooms, you just might want to check to make sure that they are properly anchored. And if they're not, when you take them off, you'll tell because they'll start coming out of the wall. Oh, that could have been a complete and utter disaster. If my son was brushing his teeth, I couldn't imagine what would have happened. And you'd be surprised too, the glass shattered and just sprayed out. It was like a grenade going off. So close call there. One last thing though, what's ahead? Things have been so slow lately. I'm amazed at how slow they've been. And that's why I haven't been producing as many videos. I'm not going to work really hard to produce a video about next to nothing that's going to get 10 views. But I think that's going to change over the next couple of weeks. I really expect the Canon R5 and R6 firmware to be coming out very shortly. I expect more information coming out on the A7 IV and the A9 Mark III. We're supposed to be getting that announced at CES. Now again, it's a Sony rumor, so I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's something to keep an eye on. And of course the R1. We haven't had a development announcement from Canon yet. I was kind of expecting we might get that at the end of November. They did it October the 24th last year for the 1DX Mark III. So, will we get a development announcement? Will we get more information in January? I don't know, but I think things are going to start to heat up as we get into December and January. And then, of course, we're into a whole new year of camera stuff. So again, R1, A9 Mark III, A7 IV. As somebody said, this could be Sony's year. But that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. Don't forget to subscribe for your chance to win the Synco Lav S6E and M3 shotgun microphones. I'll be awarding these two microphones once the channel reaches 20,000 subscribers. And then, for every 10,000 subscribers after that, I'll be offering up a different and more expensive prize all the way up to 100,000 subscribers. At which point, I'll be giving away a brand new Canon EOS R5 full-frame mirrorless camera. And on that bombshell, thanks so much for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. We'll see you again soon.